Okay, so what if the blueprint for reality, what if it isn't some static, dusty old map, but a living, breathing, growing pattern? It's a pretty wild idea, right? Well, that's the core concept behind this incredible mystical text from 1923 called The Anatomy of the Body of God. And today, we're going to dive in and decode this thing. It's dense, it's fascinating, and you'll see how an idea that's 100 years old might actually describe our universe in a way that feels surprisingly, well, modern.
All right, so to really get where this radical idea came from, we got to go back in time. We need to understand the world it was born into. See, this wasn't just some abstract philosophical thought experiment. Nope. This was a desperate search for answers during a time of absolute crisis. So the author, who went by the name Frater Aked, kicks off his preface with this really chilling line. You can just feel the anxiety of that post-war era, can't you? All the old systems, belief, politics, society, they were just crumbling. There was this very real, tangible feeling that everything was broken.
So Akhenaten, he's looking around and seen people everywhere, just turning their backs on what he called the established order of things. You know, the old ways. They were searching for something deeper, something more fundamental to build a new world on. And for him, the answer wasn't in mainstream religion. No, it was hidden in the esoteric, the mystical traditions of the past.
So, where did he land? Where did he find this answer he was looking for? Well, it wasn't in politics, it wasn't in social reform, it was in a really ancient mystical system, the Holy Kabbalah.
And he makes this connection totally explicit. He's basically saying, look, I know this seems like a far cry from the world's problems right now, but the answer's right here, hidden in this seemingly obscure spiritual framework. He's telling everyone that the key to fixing the world is actually buried in this ancient diagram.
And here's the thing. For Aked, the Kabbalah wasn't just this one isolated system. No way. He believed it was the key that unlocked a universal tradition, a kind of secret core truth that you could find running through all the great mystical schools of thought. He thought this tradition was what made civilizations great, and losing it was what caused them to fall apart.
But there was a huge problem, a massive roadblock. If this Kabbalistic tree of life really was the master blueprint for the entire universe, then the versions he was looking at were, well, they were all wrong. They were flawed. It seemed like the original true design had been lost to time.
So he starts digging into all the available diagrams he can find from all these different scholars and sources. And he notices something really striking right away. Their proportions were all over the place. I mean, some of them were stretched out, really long and thin. There was absolutely no standard.
And then you'd see others that were totally compressed, looking, in his words, short and squatty. This was a giant red flag for him. He's thinking, wait a minute, if this thing is supposed to represent the perfect divine order of the cosmos, it can't just be random. It has to have one true, perfect, harmonious design.
And that question? It became his obsession. He was convinced that to fix the broken world, you first had to fix the broken blueprint. You had to, as the old text said, restore the device to its place. The big question was, how?
And this is where he has his big aha moment, his breakthrough. He found the answer, but not where you'd expect. Not buried in some other dusty old mystical text, but in the pure, universal language of geometry.
The key, it turns out, was this shape called the Vesica Piscis. You've probably seen it before. It's an ancient, powerful symbol tied to creation, birth, the union of opposites, the whole shebang. And what Akkad realized was that this simple shape wasn't just a symbol, it was the actual seed, the generative starting point for the entire tree of life.
And the way you build it is just so elegant, so simple. Seriously, check this out. You start with a simple vertical line. Then you draw 4 overlapping circles, all the exact same size, right along that line. And boom, just like that, the spots where the circles cross and where their centers are, those points perfectly map out the 10 Sephiroth, the 10 divine points on the tree. You connect those dots and you've got it, the one true, perfectly balanced design he'd been searching for.
But believe it or not, this was just the beginning. I mean, finding the correct proportions was huge, absolutely. But what happened next? That was the real revelation. This was the moment that the static blueprint suddenly, well, it came to life.
So, okay, he's got his perfectly proportioned tree. For most people, that would have been it. Mission accomplished, right? But Akkad, he saw something else. He realized that the simple geometric pattern that created the tree didn't just have to stop there.
Because the whole thing is built from that simple pattern of overlapping circles, right? Well, that pattern can just keep going. It can extend outward in every direction, generating this vast, incredible, interconnected lattice of trees of life that can fill all of space.
And what's really wild is that the pattern works in both directions. It can expand out to the infinitely large, but it can also contract inward. It's like a fractal. If you could zoom in on any single point on that tree, you would find the entire pattern again, perfectly replicated at a smaller scale. And you could keep zooming in forever, down into the infinitely small.
You can just imagine the moment this hit him. I mean, this is the climax of his whole journey. The blueprint for the universe wasn't some static, dead map on a page. It was alive. It was a dynamic, growing, fractal pattern, an infinite living organism. And that's when he calls it, in his own words, the very anatomy of the body of God.
Okay, so that's all pretty cosmic and grand, right? But what does this infinite blueprint have to do with us, with you and me, as individual people? Well, for Cod, this is where it all gets really, really personal. He brings in that super famous Hermetic idea, as above, so below. What that means is the pattern that structures the entire universe, the macrocosm, the big picture, is the exact same pattern that structures each one of us, the microcosm. We are quite literally built in the image of the cosmos.
And he doesn't mess around. He makes the connection incredibly direct. You see the top of the tree, the point called Kether? That's pure spirit. Well, that corresponds to our inner spirit. Down at the bottom, Malkuth, the world of matter, that's our physical body. And right there in the middle, Tifereth, the balancing point, that's our soul, the thing that connects our spirit to our body.
So, what's the point of all this? The whole purpose of figuring out this blueprint is so we can actually use it. He says the great work of being human is to consciously work on and build our own soul, our consciousness, so that it perfectly mirrors this universal design. It's all about choosing to align our inner selves with the fundamental pattern of reality itself.
And that's the incredibly powerful idea sitting at the heart of this century-old text. It's a challenge, really. A challenge to see the universe and to see ourselves not as some fixed, finished creation, but as a living, breathing, growing process. A dynamic pattern that we're not just living in, but that we are an active, conscious part of.